This is a video alert. The reason I'm filming this today is I just ran across this past week a bunch more ignition lock tumbler assembly problems on these old cars. And what I'm seeing, folks, is a common trend to why these tumbler assemblies and the ignition locks fail, and it's due to lack of lubrication. Now, I've done a previous video on this, but in this one I'm going to harp a little bit more about this, because if you do this while it's working, it's very easy, okay? It's very easy to remove the tumbler assembly from the lock and lubricate it and put it back in. But if it sticks and you can't turn the key, you know, all bets are off. I've got three right here on the bench that we're going to take a close look at. This one here broke apart when I took it out of a 300 SD. So it's going to give you a very good look-see at what happens down inside this tumbler assembly with age. Over here I have another one out of a 1980 240D that we just removed. So we're going to open this one up and see what it looks like inside in terms of lubrication. You know, it works, but you know, it's got that typical notchy feel to it that you get with so many of these older models. And then over here I have a 1990 W126. This one has the lockout cable for the shifter, and it's a little bit different design. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use the special tools, and I'm going to pull the tumbler assemblies out. And like I say, you'll see how easy this is to get it out when you can move the key. This 1990 model requires a little bit different tool. We're going to shove this tool in here like that, and look at that. Isn't that slick? Now that means you could do this in the car. You don't have to remove this from the steering column if you catch it early enough. So once you get it out and pull the key out, then you can take a look at what's going on. And so now let's take a real close look at the insides here, and I can show you what I mean by lack of lubrication. Let's take a look at this one that came out of the 300 SD. Look at what's happened to the grease over time. It has literally just disintegrated. And of course, on this side, look at down in here. You can see how dry this is. And I think, you know, the lack of lubrication over time has just caused this part to break off, and just fell out when we took the black cap off. So, you know, some of you might be thinking, well, I can just put a little Lockies or graphite down there. I'm finding that's not enough. This needs to be lubricated with some proper long-term heavy grease, and it's kind of a trick to get it down in there and not, you know, get your key all greasy. But we've been experimenting with ways to get in there and get this re-lubricated, because you know, I want to prevent something like this. I think at this point I'm going to go to every one of my cars and and take my own tumblers out and see how they look. All right, let's take a look here at this one that we just pulled out of the 240D. Look at this right here. See that? No lubrication at all right in here. And if you look down in the lock assembly, right here, look at that. It's totally dry down in there. So you can imagine every time over the years you keep turning that and moving it back and forth, eventually this puts extra stress on the key. And look at how badly this key is worn. I mean, I've seen some bad ones, but look at how thin, razor thin that is. So this key is about ready to fail, and the stress on this key that you see here is caused by lack of lubrication. You know, okay, I know I'm sounding like a broken record, but we're going to install a new tumbler assembly in this lock, but I'm going to clean it and lubricate it before I do, okay? And then looking over at this 1990 model, look at how dry that is. There's no lubrication. You got all these moving parts in there. See that? And absolutely no lubrication. This thing is totally dry too. So I suspect if any of you out there remove your tumbler, unless you've serviced it recently, it's going to look like these here on the table. One of the things I found ideal to lubricate these mechanisms is this curved tip syringe. I mean, I just keep finding more and more uses for this, but look at how you can get down inside the tumbler assembly and just apply a little bit of the special lubricant right where you want it. And then of course on the back side you've got all these little holes that you can get into. You can get the lubrication down inside, and then of course you'll want to take the key and work it and do it again, do it a couple times, and you have to work the key in and out, you know, and wipe the key off. But the only downside to this, by the way, is, you know, having a little grease on the key. So after you do this procedure, you have to be a little bit careful where you put the key until, you know, that grease works into the tumbler assembly. I realize that some of you are going to say, well, I can't do this because I don't have the tools. It requires these special little pin tools, and, you know, we're going to give a syringe with some special grease in there, and some instructions on how to, you know, really clean them and lubricate them properly. So if you're interested in that, we'll just put a link in the description, show more below. But I tell you, if you have one of these cars, all I can say is I'm going to warn you, I told you so. You need to get that ignition tumbler out and lubricate it. I know that I'm not the only one having problems with these ignition lock and tumbler assemblies. I imagine if you're watching this YouTube video, you're probably doing it because you've got some sort of problem with your ignition system, your key, your steering lock in your own Mercedes. And the reports coming in on some of these forums tells me that a lot of people are having problems with installing it and the keys getting stuck, or they can't get this out, or they get this in and then they can't get it back out. And I got to solve this problem for our customers. I guess one of the motivating factors was I was getting so many emails from people with problems. I decided, well, I'm going to shoot some videos and do some kits. So the average DIY mechanic can go after his own ignition, tumbler, or steering lock problems. So what I've come up with is two kits. I have what I call the early screw cap kit, and I have the later, this is the snap cap, and that's how I'm going to identify them. You can't go by year and model alone, although I'll have some detailed descriptions on my website. But this cap, the early cap, started showing up in the 116 and 107 chassis, went through the 123 chassis and the early 126 chassis. And this cap screws onto the lock assembly like this, and then it locks in place. So we're going to call this the screw cap tumbler service and repair kit. And along with the tool right here, this is the special pin tool that you'll need to release the mechanism inside the tumbler, which will allow you to take it off the lock. I have the proper grease, because, you know, this is really important. You get in there and lube this before it fails. I've got some brushes, a brush, a specially cut brush, and Q-tips, and of course some gloves. But finally, I have a tool that we make right here in my shop that will allow you to get this cap on and off with the steering lock in the car. In other words, you can probably pull this out and replace it in 5 to 10 minutes. That'll give you the opportunity to either replace this if it's badly worn, or if it's still working properly, as I said earlier in this video, get it out and lubricate it, okay? And then in the later kit, which is we call the snap cap tumbler kit, this cap goes in over the assembly and snaps into place and locks on this ring right here. So you kind of need to know what type of ignition lock assembly you have. Once again, I've got the tools you need. This special twin pin tool that you're going to need for these later ones, the lubrication, and the other things that I include in the other kit. But I want to talk specifically about this tool right here that we have ended up making in our shop. This is the tool that you can buy on the internet. This is the tool that comes in most of these ignition lock kits that you can purchase for $30, $40. We've had a lot of problems with these, by the way. You can see the chrome is peeling off. It tends to jam up. Sometimes the angles aren't cut right. And you can see here in this tumbler assembly that I can't even get the tool to go in. See that? if I line this up, it jams up right in there and I can't get it in. So that's a real frustration. If you have a tool, you can't even get into the tumbler to release the cap and pull the tumbler out of the lock assembly. So what we did is we took a wire and we modified it. We actually grind it flat on the sides. It gives it a little more height and allows it to go in more easily, and of course depress this spring clip, which is what allows you to get it out of the lock assembly. So we don't use these anymore. We make these in our own shop and we custom fit every single one to make sure it works, and so when you get it and try to get your key assembly out, then it's going to come out. The other thing we've run into is on some of these aftermarket tumbler assemblies, we've had problems with flaws which make it very difficult to get out or in, and sometimes they do not work properly. So the aftermarket tumblers that we sell on my website, every single one of them we bring out to our shop and we test fit them in a steering lock assembly. I bet you nobody else anywhere does that, okay? So we want to make sure, if you're buying aftermarket, because the OE are so expensive, that we still want to offer the value of an aftermarket tumbler assembly, but once again, we test them, we fit them here, and if they're not right, we reject them and send them back to the supplier. So there's another tool that we include in this kit. You can read more about it on my website. It's a special emergency tool that it can allow you to get the tumbler out if this tool doesn't work. I highly recommend that if you're going to go after that yourself, you look at these kits, because they're going to save you a ton of time and a lot of frustration, and especially with the cap removal and install tools that I supply, you'll be able to do this very quickly while sitting in your car.